But now, more important, let's come to Phil. Yeah, and Phil, he is an expert in roadmaps. He has a podcast around roadmaps, and I think the more interesting stuff is where he actually comes from. As far as I know, and you can correct me on anything I say, he started off as an engineering guy, right, and went through, test and validation. So he made really like all the steps up the career ladder until he reached a point where he was like head of product management, I think at Continental for the platforms. And he really knows the stuff from different perspectives. Yeah. And lately he focused heavily on roadmaps. Is that right, Phil, or did I miss something?
I am kind of segueing a little bit away from roadmaps into decision making as well at the moment. I think it's an interesting space. Roadmaps were a convenient subject because all product managers talk about roadmaps. But I realized I'm not super passionate about them. I have some great conversations about them, but I realized that underneath there is actually a lot about the decision making of the organization.
Interesting. So when people listen now to our conversation for the next hour, what do you think they will get better, or they will explore, or they get superpowers about?
Ooh, what will their superpowers be? I think what they're going to get is a perspective on how to take multiple things that we talk about in products, like the big picture, vision, strategy, that sort of thing, objectives, things like OKRs, and a concept called product principles, and how they can all be used to help inform what we're going to put on our roadmap, how we make those decisions, and how we can ultimately hopefully make some better decisions about what we put on our roadmap, the direction of travel of our product.
Interesting. If you think about a roadmap, what is it for you? Is it a communication tool? Is it, like what is the essence of a roadmap for you?
So you just asked me the first question I ask everybody on my channel. It's like, what's the purpose of a roadmap? And so I've got so many answers for this.
Okay.
How I distill it down is that it is a communication and alignment tool. It's not a plan. It's a tool that we use to communicate our direction of travel. And it's often a collaborative tool. We use it at different phases. We use it early on to have those conversations to work out which way should we be going? Where are we going as an organization? But then we use it also to communicate to so many different groups and get them all aligned. There are senior execs and stakeholders like that. There are operations and development people. There's customers, there's partners, there's suppliers, there's salespeople, there's marketing. It's one of those kind of hub artifacts that you can use to have lots of conversations. But the problem is they all care about different things. The job to be done of the roadmap changes depending on who the audience is.
Okay. The job to be done depends on the audience. What are the major audiences you see for the roadmaps?
So we could broadly put them into two categories, internal and external. And on an internal level, usually you've got a leadership layer and a delivery layer. And I don't like using the term delivery. It's the wrong one. So development and operations, they are the creators and the people who are going to actually make this thing work. And I could kind of bundle that under the title delivery, but there's so much more to it. We know that. I don't want to kind of tar it too much that way.
Yeah.
But those two audiences care about different things. Like the senior leaders, they want long-term direction of travel. Where are we going? How are we going to change the world? Type information. A 3 to 5 year roadmap is not a bad thing there, because we're casting a vision of how we're going to get there, how we're going to go in the long term. On the other hand, if we've got development and operations, they care about something very different. It's like, how am I going to deliver? What do I need to deliver? What do I need to understand? What do I need to get ready for to be able to deliver the right thing? And so they want a shorter term, but often more detailed, more tactical viewpoint. And use that keyword there, view or viewpoint, because
Mm.
it shouldn't be a different roadmap. It should just be a
Mm.
different view of the same roadmap, maybe with a different time horizon, with a different level of granularity. But it's about selecting which information the audiences care about. My co-host and I have gone so far as to develop a thing we call the Roadmap Audience Canvas. This is a simple tool for capturing the needs of that audience, the needs of those different groups, because they care about different things. They have different needs from the roadmap. If we go to a sales audience, which are kind of on the boundary from internal and external, they kind of want some idea of what's coming when. And I know this is controversial, dates on a roadmap, what's going to come when. But that enables them to do their job. That is a job to be done of a roadmap. Now, we might not want to put an absolute commitment of we're going to ship this exact feature in 6, 12 months, 2 years' time, but maybe in the next quarter, where we have a high degree of certainty because we've done the discovery. We know what we're working on. We know what we're planning to ship. We might give them more detail on timing and be specific about the features, because that's going to enable marketing to build the right campaign. It's going to enable sales to go and have the right conversations with the customers that care about it. But equally, that sales team is then talking to external parties like prospects and customers, or it might be a customer success or an account management team that are talking to existing customers. They want to know where we're going. What are we going to do? How are we going to make their lives easier? That's a job to be done of the roadmap as well. That's trying to figure out what we show to each of these audiences, but also what's going to address the needs of our customers and users is part of the challenge. Is it serving both us as an organization and our customers and users? I mean, frankly, that's all product management, right? But that's what the roadmap is trying to communicate. And the things we put on there, if they're not serving those needs, then why are they there in the first place?
Interesting. And, like if you have such a diverse group of people and different perspectives, do you all integrate in one, or do you have multiple perspectives on the same thing?
So I'm kind of at 5 typical views of a roadmap these days. First view is my senior leader and exec version. The second view is my development and operations version. My third version is for sales, and marketing. It's kind of being a little bit more open than they're allowed to even show to the customer. So the customer has a different level of trust. Prospect, maybe a different level of trust. And those may get merged. The sales and the customer one may be the same. But also there's partners. If we're working with external companies that are not our customers, but we need to deliver together, we need to share some elements of where we're going and what we're doing. And so those are kind of like my 5 to 6 typical views that I'm looking at. But I emphasize their views. They should come from a single source of truth. Now, I wish I could say I can go to one perfect tool and it just, with a click of a button, gives me exactly all those views. I've not found it yet.
Yeah. That's the tooling question. Yeah. But let's leave that out, the tooling question, because actually, like you said, okay, you're passionate about the decision mechanics, the engine behind which produces the roadmap. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, what's the engine behind that roadmap?
There are typically kind of 3, I guess, big points of data that I start with. I guess there's a fourth as I think about it, as I'm saying it now. Data point number 1 is the big picture. It's what's going on in the world. It's all that context. It's our vision. It's our strategy. It's like, where's the end goal that we're trying to get to? And what's happening in the world that informs that? And we're going to go off and do a load of discovery to kind of get into the detail. I guess that's the fourth one as I thought about it. It's like that's going to help us steer. But the problems don't change that often. The big problems, we decide that at a strategic level. We decide to go forwards in this direction and say, these are the problems we're going to solve. That's leadership's job, to say, these are the big problems we want to solve for our customers and our users. And then it's product's job, the product team's job, in fact, to go and say, right, we need to understand these problems better. We maybe need to break them down a little bit further. And then we need to figure out what solutions we can create for those and do experiments to understand if they're the right solutions, if we can solve those problems in the right way. And that might sound controversial to some people. It's like, what do you mean? Products are not the ones deciding the problems to solve? And frankly, this is not me quoting myself. This is me quoting Marty Kagan. He would say, in an empowered team, actually, you don't need less leadership. You need better leadership. They need to be deciding the problems to solve, not telling you the solutions to ship. But deciding the problems to solve is still a leadership choice. It's still which direction of travel are we going? And that creates a context. It's like, here are the big problems that we want to solve. If the things I'm putting on my roadmap are not aligned with those big problems we want to solve, why are they there? We're unaligned.
Sounds totally logical, right? But where's the challenge? Because, like I imagine, like, okay, you have a CEO, he says, okay, let's have next year 25% revenue increase, right? So you might just get a number or something like that, right? So like, what is the engine, or how does the engine behave? Because I think there is a lot of, like multiple levels working on that, right? You have like at least senior executive, then you have maybe a middle management, depending on the size of the company, right? And then you have like the product teams, right? So take me through that steps, or through that engine, which produces at the end of the day, the roadmap. Like, who's responsible for it anyway, right? And all these details, like what is the process?
Well, I think you hit on one of the other aspects. So I mentioned the big picture. I talked about discovery, but actually there's two more legs to come in here. And one of those is objectives. How are we going to measure success? And we might have simply a revenue number. Hits and a 20 million ARR, whatever the number is. And I know a lot of product people get upset when they're told that they should be worrying about a business metric. Product is a business role. Product always has been a business role. The pendulum has swung a long way towards just building stuff, being in the technology organization, but it started as a business role. And right now we are seeing a swing back to a more business-centric view. We're seeing a swing back away from just growth at any cost to we've actually got to care about profitability. We've got to care about the business side of things, the commercial side of things. Heck, when I started my product career, not even as a head of, just as a product manager, I had a $300 million product portfolio with P&L responsibility. Now, things have moved a long way since then.
What?
That was not unusual. We were mini general managers. It was a path to general management. Now, that's a US-based model, but that's where product comes from. I was working for an American organization. That sort of model hasn't really been adopted in Europe. But there is definitely a push right now for that more business-centric, but more commercially savvy aspect to product. And so we've got to think about what are the objectives. And let's be honest, most days when we talk about objectives, people are going to talk about OKRs. It's the most common framework we're going to use. And so you might have some business or impact level metrics. I have a concept I call OKR 0. OKR 0 is basically the mission and vision of the product put together with the top business metric for that product and the North Star metric for that product. Those are my KRs.
1 second. Repeat, please. That was too fast. You take the North Star metric and what the second metric?
Business metric.
Make an example, please.
ARR. That could be our top business metric. What is the thing that as a business we say is success? And the North Star metric is the product metric, the changing customer behavior that we're trying to drive, ideally linked to customer value. That might be, I don't know, number of songs listened to on Spotify. That might be the North Star metric for a service like that. And then there are many metrics that ladder down below those. The OKRs for the specific team should sit somewhere beneath those and should be contributing input metrics to those higher level metrics. So that OKR 0 is kind of a framing, a strategy, a vision context of this is what the world we're trying to create. And these are the two ways that we believe we measure success for our customers at a product level and for us as a business, essentially indicating value and viability.
Yeah. And I didn't quite get the OKR 0. Like what does that mean? It's like the North Star is not an OKR, or what does the OKR 0 term mean?
So for me, OKR 0, it was a framing I used when I found that people were setting their OKRs out of the context of the North Star metric and the top business metric. They were creating OKRs that were disconnected from those important business metrics. So bringing the North Star metric and the top business metric into an OKR context, an OKR setting, and calling it 0, like it's the base. And now let's go and set the real OKRs. But it was a framing mechanism that I've used a few times, and that seemed to help people say, if I'm not driving these two metrics with my OKRs, why am I doing them?
Got it.
And so
it needs to pay directly into the bigger vision, the strategy of the company,
and the bigger objectives or goals of the business. Like we believe that by driving this North Star metric, we are delivering value to our customers, and we believe that by driving this particular business metric, financially we are successful. And if we don't believe that the things we're trying to drive are going to feed into that, we've got a problem. And so kind of using that as a framing context for OKRs overall, when creating company level and then most likely team level OKRs, it just gives that context of, right, we've got a top level. Now let's think about the next quarter. What are we driving here? And so your OKRs become another filtering mechanism for what are we doing? Like we could look at the KRs and say, do I believe the things I'm putting on this roadmap are going to contribute towards driving the KRs and the objective that I have for this quarter? If I don't, again, why are they there?
Okay, and that is the connection between strategy and vision and the...
To me, it's the second point. The strategy and vision gives me the one, and I'm trying to bridge the KRs and the strategy with that OKR 0 concept. But for example, in the strategy and vision, you probably have the big problems we want to solve for our customers, for our market. If I can't align up with those big problems, if I can't align up with my OKRs, then the things that are on the roadmap are not aligned with two of the most important things that we're setting in terms of strategy and goals for the organization. And then my third one is product principles. Now, this is something that Martin Erickson talks about a lot, and it's part of his decision stack. It's in the decision space. So I love it. What I think of it as is pre-made decisions.
Pre-made decisions. Help me understand that. Sounds good, actually, you know.
Yeah.
So you just take it out of the shelf, you know, like a book.
Yeah. It should make our lives, it makes our lives easier in the long term. In the short term, we have to have the debate. And so the principle here is, let's say I'm eBay. As eBay, I can make choices that favor the seller or the buyer. And when I come to one of those choices, if I have that choice, I'm going to have that choice all of the time. It's like, should I do this? Should I do the other? And so instead of every time having the debate on this initiative or this feature or this problem, I should favor this group, and the next one I should favor the other one, having a clear decision as an organization, this is the way we work. This is where we believe the right approach is. Like you take Amazon, they have a core principle that in the long term, customer and stakeholder value are aligned. But if they have to choose who to serve first, they're going to serve the customer. And by serving the customers better, That will lead to customers buying more, which leads to more profit, which ultimately serves the stakeholders and the shareholders. But in the short term, they might take some more cost to serve the customer better, which might has a short-term impact on the shareholders. But it's
And
about kind of having that debate early, where we know it's a hard choice. Let's have the debate. Let's really get everything out there and really understand what we believe as an organization, so that then when we come to a decision at the operational level, everyone can make that decision quickly because it's already been thought about.
On which level do you implement these principles? Because for eBay, right, and it's a good example. You could say like our vision is, to create the best sellers platform, or the vision is to create the best buyers platform, or you could have a vision, to be a platform, and then make the decision, a little bit lower in the organization or in the decision structure, right? So on which level do you typically implement these shortcuts, these decision shortcuts?
So they're typically at the product organization level, and that's a bit vague. Kind of typically not at the individual team level, but at kind of, so all the teams are living the same set of the same set of principles. So you don't have inconsistency from one team to another, but it's there. It's very much aimed at operational decision making. The contrast that Martin uses is company values. Company values are really hard to actually implement. We talk about them with these big airy fairy things, and then it's not clear what choice we're making often and how we make those choices. Whereas the classic example of a principle would be something, say, like the Agile Manifesto. Working software over comprehensive documentation. I think that's one of them. And so what it's saying is, it's not saying we don't do documentation. It's saying if we have a choice to make where we have to trade one of these off, we are going to focus on getting the software working first. It is more important. If on the other hand, but we're still going to do some documentation, it's just not the most important. It's not the primary focus. And that's, and really that's how decision-making principles kind of fits in, our product principles. It's allowing us to say, I've come to a decision point. Which way should I turn? I already know which way to turn. Or if I don't know which way to turn, now we need to have a good conversation about, is this a one-way door? Is this a two-way door, etc. If we could go down that sort of route. And so we decide whether it's something we decide quickly and experiment, or if we go and actually have to have the debate, have to think about it properly. We want to make it so that decisions can be made quickly and efficiently wherever possible, so that the organization can keep moving forward, because decisions can actually be one of the things that slows an organization down the most. And deciding what to put on the roadmap is often one of the biggest decisions we make as a product team. Yet sometimes it's done almost as an afterthought at the end of the quarter. Oh, we need a new roadmap. Hopefully you've been doing the work up to that point that it's just capturing it on the roadmap. But these three things are kind of that big context of where are we aiming for and the big problems we want to solve, the objectives we're aiming to achieve over the next quarter, and the decisions that we have really thought about clearly. If we can show that it aligns with those three things, we've triangulated a good decision. If it aligns with two, we're probably going the right direction. There's a little question mark. If it aligns with only one, we're starting to ask ourselves, is this the right thing to be doing? Are we going the right direction? If it aligns with none of them, we probably shouldn't be doing it.
Interesting. So when you talk about product principles, who is deciding about them, and in which form are they typically articulated? Is this like when it's in the culture, or is it written down, or like how do you proactively create these things? How do you start? Who does that?
I have to give the classic product answer. It depends.
Thank you. That helps.
There's the buzzword bingo. But it really does. Now, to me, it's typically made within the product organization, ideally led by the product leader to kind of to drive them through forwards. But it's a debate across the team. It's going to go into other functions as well, because sales have a vested interest, marketing have a vested interest, product have a vested interest, development have a vested interest, design have a vested interest. So we all want, we need to have that debate, and that it makes it not easy. It's not quick to do. But the point is, it's the sort of questions that we're going to have to answer lots and lots of times. You don't put 100 product principles in place. You've got a handful, 5, maybe 10 at the absolute most, I would say. And so we take the time to think about those things that are super important to our business and codify them. We're not trying to make every decision in advance. That would kind of be going down a waterfall mindset. Okay, like we're going to think about everything in advance. But sometimes it's a case of we start from, right, we want to create some principles from day one because we want to articulate our point of view. More often than not, I find that it's really you come to the point of, right, we've had to make a decision on this particular dimension 3 or 4 times in the last couple of months, and it's been a real slog to get to a choice. Maybe we need to spend a bit of time really codifying this thought process, really getting through to what we truly believe and taking away the ambiguity.
Who does that? On which level? Is it the product manager, or is it, like on which level? Is it CEO or somewhere between?
So I'd say it's led by the head of product, whoever is the most senior product person. Well, that might be a CPO, that might be a VP, might be a director. But it typically is going to include the product managers because they've usually they're usually asked to make these trade-offs. And so what you're trying to do is bring them into which trade-offs are we making and why would we make them in a particular direction.
Interesting. So we have now these 3 pillars, or these 3 aspects, right? Big picture, vision. Then we have like the principles and the objectives. How do they link now to the roadmap? Like there is a piece missing, right? Like what's the link to the roadmap?
So for me, they're filters. Like if I have something I'm thinking of putting on the roadmap and I can't point to the big problem that's in the strategy that I'm trying to solve and say, this thing is contributing to that. If I then can't look at my OKRs and say, this thing is contributing to that or more objectives, then why is it there? If I then look at my principle and say, is this consistent with one of my principles? Yes or no? If it isn't, then should it be there, or should I be doing something different? And so I'm using them like that. And you may decorate your roadmap with icons or colors, or put them in a swim lane related to the high level problems. There's so many different ways of visualizing this. Like a color, an icon, and a swim lane are the most common ones. You might have your objectives on there and it's like, okay, we put a tag in the corner. It's contributing to OKR 1 and OKR 2, we believe. Or it's a swim lane that is, these are the major problems that we've said in the strategy we want to work on. Or it might then be, it might also be a color coding for these are the things going on there. There's so many different ways of encoding it visually, but colors, tags, and swim lanes are the most common ways of kind of showing that linkage to these different things. And you could do the same thing with a product principle as well. I use them as filters. It's like, is it aligned with this? Is it supporting this? You could use simply tags within many of the tools, for example.
Let's talk a bit more about the process and the decisions in creating a roadmap, right? I think often just a product manager or even a PO, right, are asked to provide a roadmap, right, for the team. Like how is the structure? Because you talked about a lot about, you know, big vision principles, and I think they are somewhere higher in within the organization. So how do you do that? As you know, like since I guess a lot of product managers are listening, like how do they do that in practical, you know,
Yeah.
language? Like tomorrow, they need to prepare a roadmap tomorrow, and they're not responsible for the strategic decisions and for the big picture, right? How do they do that?
So let's start with, I hope they are the ones being asked to prepare the roadmap. They're not being given a roadmap.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that's one of Marty Kagan's biggest criticisms of roadmaps is that they're often given to the team, go and deliver. That's the feature team kind of problem.
Yeah.
Whereas really creating the roadmap, I mean, the roadmap artifact itself to me should be a non-event. It's like, it's a tiny thing. It's like 30 minutes a month is all it should really be. The real thing is making those decisions in flight. We're constantly making decisions as product managers, and really the roadmap is just an encoding of that information, of the decisions we're making as we go through the month. Road mapping to me is a synonym for product management. It's about making decisions about direction of travel. And so what really happens on the ground is we obviously are out there tasked with hitting an objective. So we start mapping things like either an impact mapping or an opportunity solution tree, and saying, these are the opportunities we can address to drive this outcome. Okay, let's go and do some experiments. Let's put some experiments on our roadmap as a first step, or at least let's put the problems that we're doing the experiments for on our roadmap. And those are smaller problems than the big level ones that we've taken from the vision and the strategy, because that should be something we're inheriting. Those are problems that are given to us by leadership. It's a controversial point, but product managers don't get to decide everything that they're doing. They get told these are the big problems to go and solve. And then they've got to figure out what fits inside there. Some of it is going to come in as a feature request from a salesperson. They've got to then get through to what are you really trying to do? What's the real problem behind this? Sometimes you're literally just going to have to deliver a feature. Again, controversial point. We're going to have to deliver a particular feature on a particular date some days. That's the reality. We work in business. And in that reality, there are customers making demands. Unless you are in a truly multi-tenant SaaS platform in B2C, you're going to get some demands from customers. In a B2B environment, it's natural that happens. Ideally, you take that and then go and talk to a lot of other customers and say, right, okay, how do we make a general solution that helps everybody? But there's a rubric from a lady called Radhika Dutz that I really love when it comes to making these sorts of choices. And it's the vision fit versus survival rubric. As a company, we need to get paid. We need to get paid because money is the fuel for us being here. It's what keeps us going. It's what keeps us in business. It's what pays everybody's salaries. It's what pays for the building. It's what pays for your email. It's everything. So we've got to have that fuel there. That's survival. If we haven't got that there, we're not going to survive. And there are some times you're going to make a choice that is purely about survival. Doesn't align with your vision at all. It wouldn't align nicely with those things, the three things I've just talked about. But there's another reason there. We need to survive. Because if we don't survive, we can't deliver our vision anyway. So sometimes you make a choice to say, let's do something to survive. Other times you're going to do things that are purely about vision, and there's no customer asking for it right now. You have the conviction of the future that it's going to pay off in the long term. You're doing some discovery, you're seeing some indication, but it's still quite belief driven. And in many startups, they spend a lot of time there because they haven't got the evidence yet. And it's never a perfect world of great, I've got perfect validation that this is really a problem. We've got a perfect solution to it. And sometimes you've got to go on belief. And so there you've got a vision-oriented drive, but without survival. No one's paying for it. And then lastly, well, I guess not lastly, prior to that, we've got there's no vision fit and it's not helping survival. If you're doing that, then you're just being stupid. But some people will. But then we've got the ideal segment where it's aligned to our vision and it's going to help us survive. Probably going to be contributing some of those OKRs because that's going to be driving business success. It's aligned to the vision. That's the big picture. And hopefully it's aligned with our product principles as well. Of this is our viewpoint on the world of how we best serve these customers.
I really love the picture of the survival mode, right? So that I think that's just reality, right? Acknowledging the reality, and it's not painting the nice picture.
Yeah, it's a rubric that when I first read it, I realized I'd been doing it for years. I just didn't have a language for it. And when I came across it in a book called Radical Product Thinking, it's like, that's what I've been thinking through. I just didn't have the structure to think it through.
And I also think, like it allows or enables people to break out of the rules, right? So it's sometimes we're too process oriented and, too much on, trying to achieve a perfect world, right?
Yeah. So idealism is a very challenging thing. I think most people have read Inspired, and it creates a view of this perfect product management world. Let's be honest. There are very few product people who live in that world. And that's okay. It's all right to not live in that perfect product management world. In fact, that perfect product management world doesn't actually exist. If you look at books like that, Marty goes and kind of talks to many companies, and he kind of identifies, well, here's the things that are common in a bunch of companies over here. Here's bunch of things that are common in a bunch of successful companies over here. And the perfect world is if we do them all together. That perfect model exists nowhere. If you are on like 70% of that, you are probably in about as good as it ever gets. And so kind of this kind of view that people have of, I'm not doing product right. If you're taking a pragmatic view of driving business and customer outcomes, you are doing product right.
Nice. Let me think a little bit about, like I'm sure many people struggle out there. Yeah. And let's just imagine somebody, like in a mid-sized organization, maybe your management, your top management gave you some hard targets to get, right? And you're somewhere in a middle position, right? Where you actually, you try to just break it down to your teams, or like what do you do, right? If it's let me restart the question. I think out there are a lot of organizations which we call more or less like egg organizations. There is a product and development team. They read Inspired, they read all the Marty Kagan books. They want to work agile, right? But there is a whole big organization around them, and they think in project terms, right? And that's the egg white, right? So how do you do and somebody is the at the intersection, right? They get handed over, right, hard business targets, right? And then they somehow need to, align people and live in that twist that they actually want to work agile and want to work, according Marty's world, and like how you work in a perfect world, but still there is this stuff around. So what would you say them, like how they treat the situation?
Ooh, well, I've lived that situation, for example, and there's 100 different ways of approaching it. And one will work in some places and one will work in others. One of the approaches I tried was I basically looked at the way that the company works and said, that is corporate theater. Like I need to play a role in corporate theater. And so I need to do the annual budget cycles. I need to report out the way they want to do it. Doesn't mean that it's the way that the team internally are going to work. So sometimes if you've got a powerful enough leader, they will be able to shield the organization from that corporate way of working and reinterpret and make it work in a more product-oriented way internally. Sometimes that's possible. And they're going to have a lot of work to do to kind of play the corporate side on this side and the real product way on the other side. That's it, the real product way. But you know, we all know that we want to try and work that way. And it comes down to the willingness of leadership to make those choices and say, how do we want to work? What do we want our culture to be? Now, Marty obviously has just recently released Transformed, and that book is all about trying to help people make that transition. You know, he tested a bunch of that content with a bunch of coaches like myself in London and New York a couple of years ago. And it's interesting to kind of now be looking back at it sort of 2 years later, because those coaches, we're all still having that same debate of how do we get that change to really happen? And it all comes down to, it's got to have the leadership buy-in. And typically that's at the C-suite level, or at least the divisional leadership level. If they're not prepared to buy into that change of ways of working, that, as Marty would call it, the product operating model, think of it as a technology-enabled organization, perhaps is another way of thinking about it. Like Amazon is not a product company in terms of it produces software. I guess it does in AWS, but it's a retailer. But it's a retailer that's enabled to be more efficient, more effective, because it uses technology to do it, to deliver customer and business value at scale, because it uses technology. So it's technology enabled, as opposed to you go to your retailer in the high street and they're barely thinking about the technology, which is why they can't compete, because the technology allows them to do it in such more an efficient way. Even though Amazon are now in retail stores, you know, they're going back to the way things used to be. I heard the interesting story the other day. They gave up on the walk-in, pick things up off the shelf and walk out model only recently because it just wasn't working. So the technology doesn't always do what they want it to do. For all of us, some problems are hard to solve.
I also heard that Amazon actually they had a lot of people labeling the stuff in the background, or you know, like watching the videos and then say, okay, this guy Phil, yeah, he just put ice cream in his basket.
Yeah. And I think that was a twofold thing. That was, one was the technology wasn't quite living up to it, and so they were using people to substitute, but they were also training the models so that it could learn to be better. But it still wasn't learning well enough.
Yeah, that brings us a little bit to discovery, right? So how do you incorporate learning in that? Because, you know, like, also I think it's a struggle out there, you know, like you have to discover, you actually want to just put things which you're quite certain that it actually serves a value at a customer, right? How do you do that? Do you always like have like something, you know, the quarter or the iteration before the discovery to spill it over then to the delivery, or how do you do that? Like, what's the picture there for the roadmap?
So I'm a big fan of, say, the now, next, later format, as opposed to time boxes of quarters, halves, years, or timelines. But even then, it's like, what are we putting in those boxes? The classic transition went from, okay, we'll go from a time and date based thing to, we'll now put the features in the now, next, and later. Okay, we've changed the timing information, but we still haven't changed the content. The maturity of the organization's road mapping is something you've got to consider. Like, you probably have to have a roadmap for your road mapping to think about how you mature along this path. And, you know, where I ultimately try to get to is the now column. the things we are currently working on, I don't think of that as actually the now column. I think of that as the delivering column. These are the things we are actually building the solution for and delivering against. The next column, I don't think of as next. I think of, because we're actually working on the things in that column now already. We're just not planning to ship them anytime soon. We're really doing the discovery in that column. We're really making sure we understand the problem properly and that we understand what solutions are going to make sense for that problem. So we're putting ourselves in the position that once the now column is empty, we can take something from that next column and start delivering against it. And then finally, we have the later column. And I think of that as exploration. We're going out there and trying to find the problems to solve. We've got these really big macro level problems from our strategy. Now let's go and explore that problem space and find the problems that are worth working on and ask our leadership, which ones do we think we should work on? And so that kind of shifts the kind of the meaning of those columns into deliver, discover, and explore. I quite like to have two other columns as well sometimes, depending on the audience. I have a current column. And if it's for a sales environment, I take the later column away and I put the current column there. It's like, this is what you can have right now. Don't wait until we deliver the things we're doing delivery on. Buy today, get the value you can have today. And then this other stuff is going to come in its own time, but we're not looking too far out. And internally, I probably don't put the current on, but I also put the trash or the never column. David Pereira calls it trash. I call it the never column. It's like, these are the things we internally are not going to do. And let's make it clear we're not going to do them so that whenever it comes back to that conversation again, no, we've already decided. So you've got to have a very good and very strong reason why it's going to come out of that column.
Love it. I especially love the column you called, I think, current, which you can show to customer, because quite frankly, there's many teams have a lot of stuff to offer already for the clients, yeah, and focus too much on the building and yeah. Interesting. So we have 10 more minutes to go. Yeah. So if you have questions to Phil, you just type it in here in the comments. And I know there is a little bit of time lag of about a minute or something like that. That gives me the chance to tell the audience that we have an exciting event coming up in autumn, yeah, where we have at the Just Product Conference, David Pereira, for example, which we just talked about, and Ryan Singer's talking. There is many people more coming up, which we not yet announced. And yeah, come join us. It's free in the live stream and really affordable in Munich at the Genius location, which is a cinema. So you'll get free popcorn, actually. That sounds amazing, huh?
Didn't know about the free popcorn. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, we just implemented that feature this year, actually. Yeah, it's something new. Yeah. So what Phil, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to say, obviously, I can see Jose's comment. It's been there for quite a while about leadership and their contribution. So, I mean, Jose, if you've got more kind of flavor you could add to that, then it'd be interesting to hear. But I guess for me, I'm going to use a Marty Kagan quote again. I hate using other people's quotes, but they have some good ones. It's like empowered product teams don't need less leadership. They need better leadership. And so the leadership's role is really to sense check, to sanitize, to say, these are the problems we should be solving. These are the problems we as an organization believe are most important, to take a point of view, but then also to empower the team to get out there and solve them in the best way, by doing that discovery, by understanding them properly. Sadly, too many leaders will just turn up and say, ship this. This is what we want. This is the feature we should be delivering, and it's disappointing. At the moment, we're seeing quite a strong or I guess last year in particular, we started to see a big, strong shift that direction as people went into wartime. Effectively, it's like we need to start making money. So our belief is that the way to make money is to start shipping more stuff, and to ship more stuff faster. We stop doing all this discovery rubbish and understanding the problem. Well, let's just go and build what me as a smart person, the leader, thinks is the right thing. Sadly, we all know that the reality is that's likely to ship something that is the wrong thing, and therefore we waste time and engineering effort and so on building things at the wrong thing, as opposed to discovery often is relatively quick. And the best thing you can find out from discovery is that thing we were going to work on was a waste of time.
How do you shift the perspective or the focus of a leader from the solution and the feature which needs to get delivered to the problem? If you know, like, because in hierarchical organizations, how do you manage up? How do you change their perspective?
So the simple way I approach it is for most things to not try. Let's make it really simple. You can build trust the fastest by delivering. So if they ask for something, deliver it. And it's a controversial, spicy take. Focus on delivering before you focus on discovering. Like, go and actually ship the things you're being told to ship. Make sure that delivery engine is working as a well-oiled machine. Show that you can be trusted to deliver something. And then once you, with that well-oiled machine, you probably find you have a little bit of time. And when you've got that little bit of time, start doing a little bit of discovery on something that you think will really move the needle. And then take that as a success and show the benefit of doing some discovery here led to us not building this thing that would have been a waste of time, or I'm proposing that we build this thing that we've got clear evidence. This customer said this other customer said this, and they care about this particular problem, and here's a solution that will serve them both. And we know we can definitely build it on time because we've done the feasibility work as well. We've done all of the discovery, not just is it valuable, because that's also a mistake people make. They do discovery just on the value side of things. It's like, does a customer care about it? Great. Can we deliver it viably and feasibly? Is a user going to keep using it and get value out of it? If we haven't dealt with all four of the risks, we're still leaving a lot of risk in there, and we'll probably ship slowly or late. Like, I posted something on LinkedIn not that long ago talking about wasting a lot of money. And that particular post was about how we'd done the value of that work. We'd done the viability work. But the two things that we just assumed we could do was we could deliver the thing. The feasibility was there, and the usability wasn't going to be an issue. But we were going from very much a B2B space to a product that was going to end up in a consumer's hands. And that expectation of usability was on a different level. And the data handling we need to do to work at that scale was on a different level than we'd had to do in our B2B context. And ultimately, those two things killed the product.
Wow, interesting. Phil, thank you very much for that conversation. I mean, everybody, I think, could really feel that you breathe roadmaps and that you're passionate about that, right? So I think I guess that's one of the prime things you like to exchange with people and help them with, isn't it? Or what do you do, and how can they reach out?
Yeah, so I mean, they can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Phil Hornby. I'm Phil Hornby on Twitter, although I'm very rarely there. You can come to 4 Product People. That's 4 as in, it's a bit like 4 dummies, but I'm not suggesting all product people are dummies. .com, or you can come to talkingroadmaps.com. You'll find me there. I just love talking to product people, hearing about their challenges. Maybe I've got a few ideas that could help them. Just reach out, drop me a message. Always happy to have a chat.
Thank you very much. for this really deep and inspiring conversation. Was a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. Absolutely pleasure.
Well, then, everybody who was listening, we do that often. Yeah, check out our LinkedIn profile. There is more LinkedIn lives coming up, and happy to see you back. And next time with a little bit more questions, ladies and gentlemen, please. Fill